Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Iron Sharpens Iron, where we talk about leveling up as men, mind, body, and soul. Today, we're going to dive into something really deep that affects all of us. It's called the ripple effect of perspective, resilience, and optimism. And today, I have a very trusted old amigo, compadre from way back in our high school days when we were both teachers at Socorro High School in El Paso. Now, recent doctorate, Dr. Charles Charlie Garcia. Hey, brother, welcome back, man. It's great to see you.
Primo, it's good to see you. I feel that energy all the way from San Antonio over here. I'm in Fort Worth. It's a beautiful Sunday morning. Being able to get on the digital communication with you is just so empowering. And so, absolutely, we go way back. I still remember the days where you and I walked those halls at Socorro High School, that little high school down in the valley of El Paso, and all the great things we did. And that school continues to do. So, I'm excited about today and this conversation we're going to have and looking forward to it.
Oh, as am I, man. Well, let's get right to it. Okay, so we're going to talk about perspective. So when I think about perspective, I can give you the textbook definition of perspective. I'm not much of an artist, but I think of that kind of perspective. But I think the kind of perspective we're talking about today is our view on life. What would you say?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things in my life that has really helped me achieve some of the small successes that I have, not just at home, but actually in the workplace, has been able to look at things in a way that always looks at the silver lining. That doesn't mean, Frank, to not deal with the challenges and really the some of the opportunities for us to get better. For me, it means how can I turn this into a learnable moment and how can I get better from it? And I think in my opportunity to meet thousands of people, have conversations with them, it's so important for me to recognize and understand where people are coming from. And because in leadership, and that's what I do, I lead, you have to understand that perspective and how you align yourself with communicating things to people is so important. Not one individual has the same perspective on things, but how do we align that and how do we promote a positive perspective so people can actually see that and learn from it instead of taking the negative approach.
Yeah, it's especially these days, it's so easy to look at life and say, oh man, this is terrible. Everything's going to hell quickly in a handbasket. And to lose that hope. And when we get mired in that pessimism and we lose sight of our perspective, that's when problems arise. One thing I've been following you on social media, you have something called the Wolf Pack, and it's inspiring, man. When I see you and you're up running the mountains and the hills and you're at the summit and the peaks of the mountain, man, this guy is so positive and inspirational. You truly are, and you're very humble about it too. But you truly talk the talk and you walk the walk, and your perspective is amazing. So there's a quote that prior to meeting with you this morning, I read, and it's pretty famous, but it reminds me of perspective and what you have accomplished so far and the many things you are continuing to accomplish. So this quote is: two men looked out through prison bars. One saw mud, the other saw stars. And I think that is a succinct but powerful way of capturing what perspective is, because that's isn't that what life is about? You can be downtrodden because life can give us some chingazos. We're going to get beat down for sure. But
Amen.
we have the choice as men to keep our head down, keep our heads down in the sand, or look up at the stars. And reuniting with you, I want to go back to how we even met, because it had been over a decade since I last saw you.
Yeah.
So we,
Too
yeah,
long. Too
too
long, Primo.
long. But yeah, so we were in San Antonio. We met up with a group of guys, and then we had the idea for this. So
Absolutely. And that's really interesting you said that. We were away for a while, right? We communicate a little bit in social media and every now and then, maybe every year or two, we would, catch up in that medium. But when I saw you, Frank, and you offered, we were able to connect and we were able to reconnect, right? I think we hit the ground running. And the impressive part of that evening, I think, was really the genesis of this conversation was that we were able to talk about things that sometimes are not talked about, especially this thing we're talking about now, perspective. We were talking about how we as men encounter difficulties and then how we have been able to look at those difficulties, right? Either how complex or how big, in a way that has resonated with an opportunity for us to get better. And I think that conversation would really led to a lot of things in my thinking about how we refrain sometimes from having those conversations, even as men. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't think of, besides the wolf pack, which I'll talk about here in a second, but besides these conversations we're having now and the one we had then, it's few and far between that I have conversations with men about difficulties in life, about perspective, about everything, even like love, marriage. And you look around and you see all of this dysfunction. You see all of this negativity, right? And sometimes you see a lot of anger and really just people having being depressed, anxiety, you name it, man. It's out there. And what these conversations do and what it did for me, and I appreciate you for having that with me that one night, is it ignites something in me. It almost allows me to understand that things will get better. There is hope and that we can get through things. And mind's very powerful, how we look at things, the blessings that we have. Hell, I'm blessed to be here with you. I've
No,
been
that's
looking
my man.
forward to it. We've been trying to connect for 3 weeks. Look how complex that was. But just being here, waking up and saying, you know what, I'm going to be there. It wasn't a chore. It wasn't something else I had to do. I wanted to do it from my heart. And I think it really lifted me and gives me an opportunity to talk about things that I think are important and talk with you and learn from you, Frank. So absolutely. I think that that meeting we had or that I don't know, we've got to come up with a better name for the meeting. I think it was, what do you call that word?
Catalyst.
Yeah,
Catalyst. It was turning
or
point.
even more romantic than that, it was destiny that we were able
Yes.
to be at that right time at the right place because yeah, it did start some good things. What did you think about that night? I know that you had a lot to say that night.
Yeah, one of the questions that you stumped all of us in a positive way,
Yeah.
because like you said earlier, men, we don't really go beyond superficial stuff. Yeah, we'll talk about football, we'll talk about sports, maybe we'll talk about politics every now and then, but for the most part, we're very surface based and we just very tip of the iceberg. So to delve deep into the masculine heart, the masculine soul. That is something that you rarely find. Okay. And so when you brought up the question, you asked all of us a question. Think about your happiest time, your most joyful time when you just had pure bliss. Man, you stumped all of us in a positive way because it got us to think and to truly reflect on what really matters. Because at the end of the day, you put your head down, you're working your tail off, 40, 60-hour work weeks. But when you lay your head down at night and you're lost in your thoughts, and you just realize what really matters. And it's those people, it's not the things, man. It's the people in our lives who build us up. Iron sharpens iron, name of this podcast. Because I really believe, and one of my favorite quotes, again, I'm big on quotes, is you are the average of the five people you interact with. All right. And so as a man, I want to become the best that I can be because this life is way too short. We have choices every single day to become the best, to become better or bitter. And this perspective is just giving me the insight to become better. And it's by joining men such as yourself who role models and you were saying that you learn from me. It goes both ways, brother. It's mutual, man. I'm inspired. I learned from you as well. It's just great. So that night was just amazing. And then when we had the idea of coming on, you're a natural. This is your first time, but you're in front of thousands of people as a school leader. So this is just phenomenal. Like you said, this is not a chore. This is something that finally came to fruition. Thank God.
I'm glad we did it. And Primo, you brought up something that I think resonates that I want to talk a little bit about, if that's
Yeah,
okay. Um,
absolutely.
going back to that night and having perspective, and I think some of the opportunities for us to talk about the resilience and really optimism and just looking at ways that we can get better every single day. But more importantly, being present and understanding what that means, but also understanding that something that we miss, and I've missed it for years, and I'm still getting better at it, is the understanding that it's a two-way approach to this, right? Because we are going to encounter folks in our world that are in a different state of mind, a different place in their lives. Maybe they have more struggles. Maybe they're having difficulties with their spouse. Maybe they've, had a tougher childhood. Maybe they, whatever it may be. And we interact with those folks, right? And sometimes we allow that environment to take control of our own heart, our emotions, emotional management. And although we can look at things with an optimistic lens, looking at the silver lining of things, I'm an observer of people. That's what I think. Since I've been since I was 5 years old, I've been able to have a very good EQ. God, thank the Lord. And I've been able to get along with most people. Okay. But there's some people that can't do that. And I think it prohibits even the way that men and people in general are able to interact with other people. It's not a one-way street, I don't think. I think
No.
sometimes we have our values that we believe in, we have our ethic, whatever you may call it, your rules of life, right? Your compacts that you have, that you don't stray from. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to encounter people that have the opposite. And then how do you deal with those people without devaluing them and devaluing yourself? And that's a very complex way to handle things because if you notice, most people get either triggered or their whole day gets ruined because of that one comment that somebody made. And then they don't know how to either what conflict resolution, and sometimes that doesn't even work because the other person may not be in the place to understand. And so I think that's something that even in schools, you're a school leader yourself, right? And we're trying to raise these young women and young men to become better, productive citizens. And I don't know if we talk about emotional management. I don't know if we talk about having a different perspective, about understanding how we approach others and being really ambidextrous with our approach to people, right? And so I think that's very important for us. I don't know. How do you deal with that? Does that make sense, Frank?
It makes perfect sense. And like you said, you always have to check your ego at the door and realize with the high EQ, everybody talks about IQ, but it's that EQ. And of course, you bring up something about having to do with emotions, and most men are like, we shy away from that stuff. But the reality is, you have to have a high EQ to learn how to relate with others. That's why we have the problems that we have, because we live in such a divisive time. You hear it all the time. But if people, instead of just trying to prove their point across, but to genuinely try to understand and listen where people are coming from without judgment and just be open to what they have to say and not try to win a debate. But we've gone to this point where social media has allowed for people to just spew hatred on and go back and forth. But when you really look at somebody in their eye and just see that behind that person is a story. And in that story, like you were saying, we don't know where they came from, how they grew up. Nobody in this life escapes pain. All right. That's just an absolute, we're all gonna be guaranteed some kind of pain. But it's that resiliency piece. It's that perspective that if we build upon our weaknesses, but we gotta make it stronger. It's like
Yes.
you exercise the no pain, no gain. And sadly, it's a paradox. But in life, it's how you respond to those inevitable circumstances that are going to bring us down. But if you treat as you treat everyone with love, if everything is behind love, you do every single motivation behind love, whether that person's going to reciprocate it or not, you should not devalue you as a person based on other people's reactions. But I believe that if you model that, you hear about modeling in education, you got to model it for your students, you got to model this. But if you model, that person may not understand it, they may not even be aware of it. But that optimism, which is what we were going to talk about, is contagious. It spreads like wildfire. On the flip side of that, though, the negativity also spreads like a wildfire. Just something as simple as the Starbucks. See, somebody in front of you pays for your drink and then they pay it forward. It's that ripple effect. But it doesn't even have to involve money. It can be something as simple as this real guy to guy talk. If we could just put down our guard and truly talk about those things that really matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm thinking about something happened this week to me. It's rare that I have a sit down lunch. My job is very unpredictable. So from 1 hour to the next, I can have a school that does not have power and I gotta go
Uh,
take care of that. I can have a school that maybe had a threat to the campus, and we take those very serious. So,
Sure.
we gotta react certain ways. So at times I don't have a lunch, right? I don't have a set lunch. This one day I was able to actually eat a quick lunch at this little dive, a hamburger dive, and love it because it's a very small place where the owners are working and they're the primary workers and drivers. They'll take your order. The husband takes the order, the wife makes the burgers, and then they deliver it to you and they ask you like, hey, how was the burger, right? And you don't see that a lot, right? You see a lot
No,
of
you
the
don't.
big chains and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so after that, I had a great green chili burger, one of the best I've ever had. It was amazing. I can send you one, but if you're ever in Fort Worth, I'll take you. But this gentleman opens the door, and behind him, he's almost carrying an older gentleman. And he opens the door. This other gentleman's walking in, and he's almost carrying him, and he's going slow, Frank, like baby steps, man. And I can see the younger gentleman, maybe our age or maybe a little older than us, but he is helping this man get in. But I can just see the frustration. There was something there. I keep eating my burger. They finally make it. I'm walking out as well. I open the door, get in my car. He's parked right next to me, right? And I put it together. I said, that's his dad, probably, right? So I turn on my car and he's getting something from the truck. And I think he was getting something for his father. Lowered the
Mhm.
window and I said, hey, sir. And he looks over and he said, is that your dad? And he says, yeah, that's my dad. I said, you are a hero. Thank you for taking care of your dad. I said, that's amazing. I wanted to let you know that I learned a lot from the way you cared about your dad, the way you brought him in, the patience you had. Hey, take care of that man. And he almost cried on the spot, man.
Wow.
He was like, and the reason I bring it up is because watching him, I sense something in him that he was struggling, he was maybe frustrated with having to do that. Although he loved his dad, doesn't mean that he didn't love him. It means it's tough, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to take care of people and it becomes tough on us. But I wanted to tell him that what I saw from my perspective was a beautiful thing. It was a son taking care of his father, a
Wow.
son loving his father. And it took literally 5 seconds. The conversation was less than 5 seconds because I had to go, man. I was on the road. I had to go to the school. I said, but I wanted to make sure I told him. Now, I didn't know if he was going to tell me, hey, Charlie, like the Karate Kid or like Rocky. Remember that young lady where he tries to help? He says, don't hang out with those guys. And
Don't
she
have those
excuse my
coconuts.
language. She
Yeah.
goes, hey, screw you, Rocky,
Yeah.
Rocco, whatever. And then he walks her home and he
Yeah.
said, what is it to you or whatever? But I took a chance and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, man, that's real impressive. Take care of your dad.
Wow.
And things like that, I think, are important in our world where we refrain from doing things like that because we have these filters of not doing those things, right? So, perspective, yeah, it's looking at things one way, but finding the beauty in your surroundings and then doing something small.
Yeah.
It really is not that small. I think about it now because you just reminded me. I hadn't thought about that Primo since but when I was hearing you talk about it, it reminded me of that, and it resonates to what we do. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, man. As you're sharing that touching story, man, because that is beautiful. Because our old men, I mean, our fathers are getting up there in age, and you look at them, they're not the young roosters anymore. That they're getting up there in age. So being able to just take the time out of your day and be courageous. Like you said, we live in avatars. Everything's a filter. Like we have to be careful with what we say. We don't want to offend or we don't want to compliment. We don't want people to maybe think of us that, oh, that's weird. That's really random. But if we just let go of that and just get truly connected and see the humanity of life for what it is, and it's in those selfless acts of service and love and leadership for others where we truly shine and we become fully human. You hear all this talk about, oh yeah, I want to be fully human. I need to have all these followers. Yeah, I need to make all this posts. I need to make an impact. But the impact is not found in the extraordinary. It's found in the ordinary things that we do day in, day out. And it's a lot. It sounds so easy, man. But if it were easy, everybody would be doing it, right? So I have my moments. I'm far from perfect, but I try my best to, when I'm at work, I try to find those moments and like you said, and try to compliment people or give them those words of encouragement, because you never know that those moments might make the difference between making someone or breaking someone. And we need that encouragement, especially these days.
Amen, man. I think, yeah, you hit it on the nail, man. We need that encouragement. We need that support. We need to do that. And actually, when you do that stuff, Frank, well, for me, this happens for me, it lifts me. It probably
Yeah.
lifted that guy, but man, I felt when I left, I said, man, I was able to say what I wanted to say to him. And then I reminded me to be grateful for the opportunities to do that. And it just lifted me. And I don't know if I'm speaking out of my personal heart, and so other people might have a different way of looking at it. That's the way I've always looked at it, to be able to provide that influence to others, because isn't that what I always say, do we want to be right or do we want to be effective, right? And I want to be effective and lift people up wherever I go. And that's always been helpful. Has it always worked? No, I can think of some times, Frank, where I've tried to do that and the other person was not just, they didn't want to hear it and they were in a bad place. And what I usually do is I have to have, going back to what I said earlier, like that situational understanding that this person is in a different light and I can't
Yeah,
take that personal. So
exactly.
I try to say, okay, there's billions of other people that think otherwise than this person who's being very rude or sarcastic or whatever it may have been. I will let that person just be, and I'll move on and I'll try my best. That doesn't always happen, but it's happened before. All right. But I cannot take that with me and keep it in my heart because it'll create, I think, and it has. I've been guilty of it myself. It's created anxiety, stress. And then I'm thinking about that days after. And I said, hey, should I have done this? Did I do this right? And I think that's also troubling in our lives, is that we don't know how to recover and move on from some of the things. My thing with my leadership team, I'll tell them two things we need in leadership. One, anticipatory acumen, right? Looking forward to things and knowing when things are coming, getting ahead of it, right? Being savvy about that. But you also need a tolerance for ambiguity, right? And being able to understand that you don't always know if what you said or how your plan is going to work.
Yeah.
There's got to have faith in it. And if you don't have, that's where that anxiety comes in. That's where that second guessing comes in. We're all guilty of it, especially
Oh,
myself.
yeah.
And I'm just learning how to get better. I'm 45. I'll be 46 here pretty soon. And I can just, I'm just at the point where I'm able to talk about it. If you
Yeah.
asked me 10 years ago, Frank, I may have been able to do some of those things, but maybe not as intentional, where I wasn't even aware of those things, that I had the opportunity, the influence to do those things. So anyway, but I know we were going to talk also about resilience. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Ooh, my
So,
favorite topic, man. What do you think about
oh
that?
man,
Resilience, grit.
resiliency, grit. Yes, life's going to knock us down. We've already talked about that. We know it. But it's not if you're going to face the challenges, but it's going to be a matter of when, not if, but when. But the difference between those who stay down and those who rise again is resilience. But here's the good news, man. I talked about it earlier. Resilience is like a muscle, and you can build it or you can let it go by the wayside. But we're here to encourage, man. And so it's important that resilience, I think, a lot of us get the message. A lot of men get the message. Like, you just got to keep it inside. You got to internalize it. Okay. We talked about internalizing other people's pain, but I think the kind of internalizing is our own pain, where we got to tough it out. We get this message. We got to tough it out. It's about adapting, learning, and coming back stronger, though. Whether it's getting fired, facing a relationship issue, or dealing with your personal struggle, resilience gives you the tools to handle it all. So every time you bounce back from failure, I believe you come back more unstoppable.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I was asked a question years ago about my kids. I was 21 years
This
old,
boy,
senior
man,
at
he's growing.
UT Austin, man.
A
Hook 'em
senior
horns.
already. Hook 'em
Hook
horns.
'em horns. Jack is 17. He'll be 18 in February. He's a senior at IM Terrell. I got two seniors,
These
believe it or
giants, yeah, they tower you.
not. Good looking guys, better
Yeah,
looking
good
than
looking
that.
guys. Good
Yeah.
looking guys for sure.
But they asked me, the question was, I think I was in my graduate class over at UT Austin, saying, what would you want for your kids? What's the, you can have anything, any attribute, any characteristic. What would make you, what do you want as a father? And it's this piece right here, I think. Obviously, love, I want them to have a loving heart, right? That's the given and be a good person. But really, the skill set that I think is very important for them to have is grit, resilience, being able to bounce back and it not be a failure, but a learnable moment
Yeah,
where they're able to learn, recover, and move on. I think if Gage and Jack can have those, I'd be very happy. And the reason why is that every day we have circumstances where we have to be resilient. That means the world to our future, to the people around us, to how we view ourselves. And sometimes people are too hard on themselves. I see a lot of pain in folks. When as I said earlier, I'm an observer of people, and when I look at them, I almost think there's something that happened to that person, and they're still holding on to it, whatever it may be. Because we're going to have, unfortunately, we're going to have deaths in our families. We're going to have divorces sometimes. We're going to have infidelity. We're going to have us doing something that's a mistake. It is in the piece of the post actions that people take that I think is so important when they recover from, right? Because we, Frank, when do we talk about recovering from a failure or even how to apologize to somebody or even how to say, hey, picking up the phone and saying, hey, I told you I'd do something. I didn't do it. This is why. I'm sorry. How could I make it right? We don't do those extra layers of steps. And then a lot of times it's not modeled for us.
exactly.
We don't see it. And so I think it's so important for us to really lean in on that piece because I think it's so important for men, for us to talk about it and get better. I certainly want to get better. And I'm sure you've had some failures in your life, Frank, that
No,
you
Manny.
recover from and maybe not, or still carrying with. I know I am.
No,
Certain things that I still carry with me that I need to probably reflect on. But I'm sure you would want that for your own children, Frank, and those beautiful kids that you have with your beautiful
thank
wife,
you.
and you embrace them so very much. But
Thank you.
what do you think about that, Frank?
It is a blessing. I mean, as a father, I don't, in a way, we as men, the first thing we ask, so what do you do? Growing up, what sport are you? You're a football player. Oh, you got to be, we compartmentalize ourselves. But there's just so many more facets than me as a school counselor or a school official. I'm a father. I'm a son. I'm a runner. But above all, my faith is rooted in God. I'm a child of God. And that to me is the catalyst. Without that, if I don't go a day, you're talking about self reflection, about those internal wounds. If there's a day that I don't lift up my spirituality, it makes a difference between a great day and a terrible day.
Yeah.
If I don't just stop, pause, reflect, be it in prayer, read something inspirational, I'm gonna I'm gonna have a terrible day. And then my wife's gonna see me angry, my son's gonna see me angry. But what am I modeling? What am I showing? What's the legacy that I'm leaving? Now, that's not to say that they're never gonna see me have my bad moments because we're not perfect. We all have something, right? We all have some kind of cross in our lives. But if I make it a habit, okay, and I'm not resilient and I don't show that resiliency, what am I modeling for my children? What am I modeling for my wife as a protector? If there's a noise in the middle of the night and I told my wife, here, you go. No, what am I doing as a man? As men, we are called to
Yeah.
lay down our lives for
Yeah.
those entrusted in our care. You can be a wimp or you can be a winner.
Mm.
It's that simple. Life is tough. We know that. But with the resources, material, spiritual, physical, and the friendships and the brotherhoods that we can forge, that's what's going to help us gain that resiliency to not, to when life throws curveballs at us, that we're going to bounce back up and look back and say, you know what? That really sucked, but here I am now, and I'm much better for it. I made that mistake back then, but you know what? I have a choice. I can either I define myself by that mistake, but I'm so much more than that mistake, and I refuse to define myself by that mistake because I bounce back, and I can be a warrior or a sloth. It's
Mm.
that simple.
Yeah, man. You just brought something that my dad taught me early on. He's probably got to see us seniors big on this conversation we're having, especially resilience, and he's a sports guy, so he loves football and all that
Yeah.
other. But the boxing was something that we always did, and so growing up, I boxed the whole. I still do a little bit of that on occasion,
I see you're
but
not set up. Yep. I
yeah,
see
I
you're
got
in
I
it.
got a little
Yeah.
setup here in the gym. We'll talk about
Very
that maybe
nice.
at the next one. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
bring some about surrounding ourselves with what we need and being able to.
Sure.
Our environment's so important. Everything I think we do, even how we set up our home gym, to the way that we set up our home. Is it a home or is it just a house?
Right.
Or, but my dad would tell us he went back to this old trainer called Casamato. I don't know if you know who that is. Do you know who that
Sounds
is?
familiar.
Yeah, he is a very famous trainer. Actually, he's the one, if you study the Rocky films,
Yeah,
so
of course.
Stallone basically took all his, when you see that trainer Mickey, almost word for word, what he says to Rocky, he got from Cuss. So if you look at Cuss Amato, you'll hear him saying the same thing. And he took Sylvester Stallone took that and he made Mickey the trainer. Even when he tells the Rocky in that scene, he goes, "We lose things in this world, right? We lose our friends, we lose our loved ones, and we got to have something to live for, Rocky. And you're why I'm living." That is taken verbatim from.
Oh man.
But he also said something that resonated with me that you brought up, and that we're talking about here about resilience, being able to apologize, being able to have that conversation with your wife when you know you're wrong sometimes, and you don't want to.
Yeah.
I do that a lot. Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
wrong, and I go back and apologize. I need to get better at that, and really verbalize that. But my dad would tell me, Mijo, fear can be your friend or your enemy, right? And that fear resonates with being a hero or a coward, like you just put it. You put it winner or wimp, hero or coward. And he says, there's no difference between the hero or the coward besides what they do, the actions they take, what the hero does and the coward doesn't do.
Oh,
That's the only thing that separates them. And to your point, however we ground that or anchor that in our world, whatever it is that we're dealing with, I think it's important to understand that the actions that we take, the rolling down your window and saying, "Hey, sir, man, you're awesome, man. You're a badass because you're taking care of your dad. Thank you. Man, that, and just doing that little thing right there. Or even you reaching out to me and saying, Primo, let's get together. Let's talk. Let's continue doing it. Setting up this pod. You're an expert at this. I'm not.
nah, I don't. Far
You
from it.
are. You are, man. Come on.
I'm learning as I go, man.
You're my guy. So
I was a weather guy, so I got paid to guess the weather.
but Frank, that always resonated with me as a kid and anything I did. And I'm so grateful for the parents that I had, and both of them are amazing.
Yes.
My dad always tell me that, and it stayed with me. The only difference between a hero and a coward is what one does and one doesn't do. And we got to be able to bounce back and talk about those things. And when we can't bounce back, how do we ask for support? How do we learn? And that's hard for some folks. And it really is. It's not as prevalent in our world, especially with men, that they ask for help or they're able to bounce back because of the stigma that we all have, that we got to be sometimes perfect. And then the man in the mirror syndrome. If we knew how little people thought about us, we would be okay. We do our life, but we always think people
Yeah.
are thinking about us, and people are not really thinking about you. It's trust me, they're not. So
They're
be
not. Yeah.
even when you f up, even when you mess up, if you apologize and say, "Hey, I got that wrong," people are very kind, right? And I always say this too. I tweet this a lot or exit a lot. I said the world is beautiful and people are kind. We just got to remember to look for it. And that's perspective. And I think a little bit about resilience. But the last thing we're going to talk about, I think, is might be my favorite, man. Optimism, right? Are you a
Optimism.
digger? Are
Yeah.
you an Eeyore? Why is
Yeah.
optimism? Why is that so important for us in the way we look at things and the energy we bring, enthusiasm, and being able to really, lean into that? I think that's so important. And I see you as that person, man. I see you like a
Thank you.
digger. I remember when I met you in Tokoro High School, I was like, "Who's this guy, man? I want to learn from him, man." You were so good with your words, and if I may be so cavalier, you were just so charismatic with your approach to communication. You just had something in you, and you were able to verbalize things and your energy, and you were always willing to do things out of the box. I think one time, I don't know if you remember this, but we held some kids after school one time, and we had like a TED
I
talk.
yes.
You don't remember
Yes.
that, but I do. And a lot of people wouldn't have stayed after and kept those at-risk kids. And we did a motivational deal for those kids.
I
You were
remember that.
let's do it and you were excited, you planned it. Anyway, man, I appreciate that. But optimism, man, what does that mean to you?
Hey, going back to that day, let me just say, since we're being just brutally honest, those were some of the best days of my educational career. We had an awesome team. It wasn't just colleagues; it was like a family, if you think about it. And so, in doing that and sharing that experience with you, we could have gone home for the weekend and said, "All right, we're clocked out." But no, we wanted to be there for those kids. And I remember using a visual. All right. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was a soda bottle or something, right? And then I held it and I said, all right, this is our lives. The contents inside. And then I just kept shaking, and went boom. And I made a mess. Long story short, the whole point of that was a concrete, powerful, or I thought it was a powerful image of showing the difference between being an optimist and a pessimist. Are you going to be full of life? Are you going to have zest? Or are you going to not have zest? And I try every single day to have that zest. And it's through surrounding myself with the people. It is about the relationships that we build day in, day out. Something as simple as you said, telling that gentleman the hard work that he's doing with his father, or the colleague who may be struggling in a lesson, and giving a word of encouragement, putting your ego aside. And you said something amazing, because that is the one thing when you give of your optimism, because usually checking account, you deposit, withdrawals, and deposits, okay? But when you give away something like that of your optimism and your hope, you're getting something in return. Like you said, it makes you feel good. It makes you say, you know what? That really felt good. That, because it personalizes the situation. You're not just giving them money. Obviously, money helps to any to be a philanthropist or to donate, right? But when you spread that optimism, and then you never know about that proverbial ripple effect, what it's going to cause you through that one selfless act. You don't know what that person's going to do, and that person's going to do. You just don't know where the power of that influence goes. And I'm all about optimism, which is why those movies like Rocky resonate, or Braveheart, that just speaks to our souls.
Yeah, man, yeah, I think that you hit on the nail. The ripple effect to other people that you influence is impacted. And I think I can think back at a couple of opportunities I've had to go into a boardroom or a staffing meeting, and we've had to deal with some very tough situations. And there's opportunity. I think optimism is taken sometimes in many contexts, but at times of crisis is where you wouldn't think that being optimistic is the approach, but I think that's a grave mistake. We've lost staff members, where we've lost a student, where we have had to turn over a staff, right? And we have to move people from one school to another school. All of those situations, I think the real trick is to find something that can be positive, right? And still resonate with the values, but still be empathetic to the people. And I think great leaders, the best in the business, are able to tell a story of the why and the impact that whatever situation has impacted everybody here, right? However, they still lean into we have to continue moving forward because of that. And how do we do that? And there's a big gray area there, Frank, I think that we don't do well. And we're almost afraid to talk about things like that and say, hey, we have to value whatever happened, learn from it, or mourn, and then we got to get back up and we got to keep going. I think there's a lot of stigma there where people don't understand how to deal with situations like that. And they say, you don't bring optimism. Well, optimism is not always being rah, rah, rah. That's one part of it. That's the
Sure.
charismatic, that's the enthusiasm, which I love, by the way. I love doing that. But there's also other pieces where you have to understand that you use that for ammunition, right? Going back to the movie Rocky, my favorite scene in the world, man. Whenever I'm down and I need a pump up, you like just like you, I love Rocky and I love all the messages it sends, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people do, so it's no secret. But there's a part in Rocky 2 where the wife is pregnant. She's struggling a little bit with her pregnancy because she has to work, and he's going through some, should I box? Should I not box? Because I think they told him that he's not going to be able to see very much longer if he takes more hits to the face. And then she's like, I don't want you boxing. So he stops boxing, right? And then he has this conversation with her and he says, Hey, I gotta start boxing again. And she's, oh man, I'm not happy about that, right? So there was some conflict there with her.
Sure.
So so he was training, but he wasn't training like, he still had that I guess that you can call it like an anchor. The difference between an anchor and having the rowers, right? Keep the anchors away and keep the rowers going, the oars.
Yeah.
So he had an anchor there, his beautiful wife telling him that she didn't want him boxing. She gets sick, right? Close to the pregnancy, she has her baby, but it's a very tough delivery for her. Remember that part?
Yeah.
And then
Definitely.
she's like in a coma or she's out, man. She's out and he goes to the church, he's praying, he reads to her, he's taking a book and he can't read very well. And you get to know him a little bit. And his trainer's there with him. And his trainer says, Hey man, you got this chance. You're blowing your chance. And he says, Yeah, but my wife, I might not even do it. Anyway, she wakes up, right? And they're all there with her. And he's like, Wow, she's awake. And he's like, Hey, he's just happy she's awake. He goes, Look, I know you don't want me fighting anymore. And I get it. And maybe we can do something else. I can find some other way to feed our family, basically what he's saying, because that's all he knew. And then she says, You look tired. And then he says, Yeah. And then she leans over, I need you to do something for me. And he goes, What? And she says, Win.
Win. Boom. Cue the music.
Optimism
Oh,
in the face of a tragedy. And that's optimism. She gave him optimism. And he says, What? And then what does the trainer say? What are we waiting for?
what are we waiting for? Yeah.
And that's my favorite scene because in life we go through those things, right? And it may not be a win in the situation, but you lift people up. You cannot let people mourn forever. If you love that person and whoever's mourning, right? And then you see them mourning, and it's a long mourn. When they go through depression, they miss the person that died, and they're mourning for their loved one. What do we do? How do we bring back that optimism to that person? Still being empathetic to the fact that we understand that you missed that person. And that's the optimism I think that we lack a lot of times, where we don't bring it into that equation. We don't know how to figure that win. Let's go. Okay, we can move on. But yeah, I think that resonates in my world where I get an opportunity to do that every day and I bring it as much as I can. In my own life too. I've gone through a lot of things that we can talk on the next time we have one.
It will be a next time.
All right, all right. But yeah, does that make sense to you with the optimism part where how important it is for us and the layers of that in our world sometimes that then people may not see or misinterpret as just being something as simple as that Rocky piece, right?
Exactly. And what's interesting that you say about that is because you're right. Optimism isn't always about the rah, rah, rah. That's usually what is conveyed. However, the optimism, it's in the setbacks, it's in the difficulties. Child is sick, your wife is sick, the health problems. You lose, like Mickey said, you lose in life and you keep losing. However, it's still being able to have that grit that despite all that, you're still going, you're still pushing ahead. You're not quitting. You're just going full on, full on. But does that mean it's easy? Absolutely not. But if it were easy, we wouldn't have all these mental health issues.
Yeah.
That's not to say to undermine mental health illness at all,
Hmm.
but there's a component, I think, that a lot of the resiliency, the optimism, the grit all have to work together, even on those days where you're just saying to yourself, I can't. But if you hear that Adrian in your voice saying, win, win, whatever cheerleaders, and sometimes you have to be your own cheerleader because you may not have the spousal support for whatever it is. And so you have to learn how to navigate that fine line of being loyal to the people you love, but know that it's for the best. And going back to the Rocky scene where he got hurt, I think it was also in the second one, but Adrian tells him essentially that he needs to quit boxing. And he says something that's so, 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 he gave her harsh truth. And he says something that's so powerful in love, but he gave her harsh truth. And he says something that's so powerful He said, I never asked you to stop being a woman. Don't ask me to stop
Yeah.
being a man. And I think that's the fine line that a lot of marital issues would be resolved. Couples try to understand the female soul and the masculine soul. Because my wife makes fun of me and she doesn't get the whole fanfare for Rocky. But I say, hey, you got to be a guy. I mean, Cobra Kai, Rocky, because that speaks to our soul. And it's like I try to understand why she likes The Notebook. And true story, I did watch it, but my point in saying that is, as men, we have to be vulnerable and share and try to enter the worldview of your and not discard as like, I'm macho. I don't need to do that. No, but at the same time, ladies, you need to understand the masculine soul and why we're programmed a certain way in a world that tells men to stop being men, that there's this toxic masculinity. Yes, it can be toxic, but I think the kind of positive masculinity we're looking for here is an emphasis on that optimism, on being that positive role model and being a selfless leader. And our time is just almost about up, man. But how can people find you? Do you have your X Twitter handles, Instagram, YouTube?
Yeah. I do a lot of X most of the time, kind of a mixer of business, and I throw in a little bit of inspiration there. So Charlie Garcia FW is my handle on Twitter. That's about it. I'm not much into. I have Facebook and an Instagram, but that's more for my inner circle. I don't really share that very often, Frank. But they can find me there. And really, I want to thank you for the setting up this opportunity for us to talk and have a conversation. I think it really empowered me to be able to reflect on these topics that we had. I look forward to continuing this relationship and really the empowering ourselves and hopefully others. I will leave you with the fact that this conversation reminded me how important we all are to each other. It doesn't matter what city we live in or how long we haven't talked, but the connections we make in our world, never know how those will be impacted later down. And that ripple effect is very powerful. So thank you, Frank, and I look forward to the next one. Please give the family and everybody else in San Antonio right now over
Yes.
there, please embrace everything we talked about today. I hope you have a great week, and I hope you find that peace in your heart and that enthusiasm for life that we all need. And I see in you. I hope
Thank you.
you continue doing that daily. And if you haven't, or you're having a rough day, remember, win, get up, you son of a bitch, because Charlie loves you. That line from Rocky. But it's been a pleasure, man. When's the next one? What are you
We
thinking
are
here?
already, man, sooner rather than later. I will definitely be in touch, brother. But you know what, man? Thank you so much for your kind words and send all my love to your family as well. And keep making that difference. And no matter how hard it gets, I know that wherever you light a room, you're going to be saying those things that need to be said because you're brave, you're courageous. Love you, brother, man. It's always a pleasure connecting with you. It doesn't matter how long, time, space, doesn't matter. Nothing transcends this amazing brotherhood, brother. So thank you very much for being on.
Absolutely. Let's do it again.
Yes, sir. Take care.